In the 1970s, the Cybermen were very misrepresented. With their final proper appearance in 1968's The Invasion, they only had made a couple of cameo appearances in the entire Third Doctor era, but never faced that incarnation. The most prevalent of these was in Carnival of Monsters, as one appears inside of the miniscope. So after 6 years, this story was commissioned for Tom Baker's first season as the finale, even though it was planned to be for the next serial, Terror of the Zygons, to be the last, but it was later moved to the start of season 13. Also, this was filmed after the Ark in Space, saving many financial problems, meaning that the production order of season 12 is Robot, then the Sontaran Experiment, then the Ark in Space, then Revenge of the Cybermen, to end it off with Genesis of the Daleks. So, Revenge of the Cybermen came out in 4 parts between the 19th of April 1975 to the 10th of May 1975. This story was written by Jerry Davis and directed by Michael E. Bryant, produced by Philip Hinchcliffe, and was heavily edited by script editor Robert Holmes. This story starts with the Doctor, Sarah and Harry spinning with the time ring as they land on Space Station Nerva after Genesis of the Daleks. Now, there is 4 things I want to mention here. The first is that the Doctor's brown coat mysteriously disappears between stories, creating a really obvious continuity error. Speaking of which, I've been creating a massive error myself, as I've been calling Space Station Nerva for the last couple of reviews as Nerva Beacon, as we eventually learned that the TARDIS crew are actually thousands of years prior, where Space Station Nerva is actually called Nerva Beacon, which I'll get into a little shortly, and they're waiting for the TARDIS to come back from the future, and the whole time I've been calling it Nerva Beacon, when I meant to say Space Station Nerva. The third thing is more of a special edition thing. So when I reviewed the Ark in Space, I didn't mention the CGI editions that they added on when it was in its special edition DVD. And the only change is that the space station is in CGI, which isn't that big of a deal. So that's why I didn't mention it. But for this story, there are many new additions that were added for the Blu-ray release of the Season 12 collection box set, which includes that said model change, but I'll bring into the main one later. But as a whole, I find it kind of jarring, and it takes me out of the story quite a lot, as the CGI doesn't really blend well with the old footage. The final thing is that when they are back, the time ring disappears, and that's the end of it. But I do find it a bit weird that the Time Lords gave the Doctor a faulty time ring. Like, you'd think they'll send him back to the right time, but nope, they sent him thousands of years prior. So, going back into the plot, Nerva Beacon is infected with a plague, as multiple bodies are seen on the floor as we meet our supporting cast. We first meet Warner, who is a communications officer, and his job is to communicate the newly discovered asteroid near Jupiter, which is actually a planet being Voga. And the discovery of Voga is the whole purpose of the Nerva Beacon, as it is designed to update other ships on the discovery of it. But it can't work at its full capacity, as the majority of the crew are dead. The rest of the surviving members are Commander Stevenson and Officer Lester. The only other survivor is the suspicious Professor Kelman, who is a normal civilian who was invited on board to be a planetary surveyor for the planet Voga. Now, we actually get to see that Voga is an actual planet with people inside, in their caves. And the caves were actually filmed on location at Wookiee Hole, which is notorious for bad luck, which I'll get into a little later. One of the main Vogans is Vorus, and he is the guardian of the mines, with his henchman Margrick, who is only in like 2 scenes, but he's played by Davros actor Michael Wisher. In episode 2, we meet the leader of the Vogans, which is Councillor Tyrone, who is very passive and wants to keep the Vogans a mystery. But a civil war soon forms between the militia and the Guardians. Now, Tyrone is played by the legendary Kevin Stoney, who played some of the biggest bad characters in the black and white era, being Mavic Chen in the Daleks' Master Plan, and Tobias Vaughan in the previously mentioned The Invasion. Back with Vorus, we learn that he's building a rocket to destroy the Nerva Beacon, and he has a spy on board, which he'll pay with gold, as that is the natural resource of Voga. And this spy is actually Kelman. Now, Kelman is also in cahoots with the Cybermen, and he has used the Cybermats, in I believe their final appearance in the classic show, to infect people with the so-called plague. But it isn't a plague, and it is some sort of metal virus thing. So the Cybermen are back, and they look very similar to their previously iconic appearance in The Invasion, which has been dubbed as the early Cyber faction design. This new design has one major new addition, being a gun turret on the head, which is so similar to the other one that even the 2005 Doctor Who team got them mixed up, as this gun turret design helmet appears in Henry Van Statten's museum in the episode Dalek. Another notable thing is that this is the first appearance of a cyber leader, with the iconic black paint job on the helmet, which will become a staple of Cybermen stories in the future. These Cybermen are actually called Cyber Nomads by fans, because of their more passive and emotive personality. I will get into my problems with them very shortly. So, back to the main plot. We see the TARDIS team just wander around Nova Beacon, and this interesting scene happens to Warner. I don't know why, but I find it pretty funny that this tiny silverfish thing is so powerful and can just jump on a full adult man. But as this happens, there's a strange remark that is said by Commander Stevenson.
The rivets have been taken out.
Well, from the other side, sir, but that's impossible. They're blind-headed.
They could have been loosened with a sonic vibrator.
I have zero clue why he calls it a sonic vibrator, but it can have a completely different meaning, fully out of context. Anyways, the main cast meets up, and the TARDIS team attempts to help Warner, leading to the idea of using the transmat to kill the alien cells. But they're delayed as the Doctor tries to spy on Kelman, as he's suspicious of him. Eventually, Warner does die. The cliffhanger for part 1 is that the Doctor is stuck in Kelman's room, as poison gas emits from the electric floor, and that Sarah Jane gets pounced on by Cybermen. This cliffhanger is quickly resolved as the Doctor escapes and just helps Sarah and Harry, as Harry transmats to the surface of Voga with Sarah. On the surface, Sarah gets better as the alien cells leave her body. Now let's talk about the cursed production of this story. So apparently, director Michael E. Bryant's wife stole some silver arrowheads from the cave, beginning the cursed production. So first thing is that multiple crewmen have claimed to see a ghost of a man in a diving suit, who was actually a real person who died years before production, as he drowned in deep water in a small pond. Eventually, crew members went home for either being claustrophobic and seriously ill. Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter reported that they forgot to film a scene to Bryant, but they couldn't locate their scripts. An electrician broke his leg as a ladder collapsed under him, and a pyrotechnician couldn't make the lights work. One day, crew members disobeyed orders by touching a witch-shaped rock formation, which then later led to the most infamous part of this cursed production. So there's this scene that they made for part 3, where Sarah has to go on the small boat across the water section I mentioned earlier. And also, the boats were faulty and didn't work very properly. So, when they filmed this section, it started to go haywire, and it started to drive itself towards a wall. Luckily for Liz Sladen, she was able to jump off the boat before it crashed into the wall. And stuntman Terry Walsh had to jump in to save her from drowning, who eventually also became ill. After filming, Bryant claimed to have reburied the arrowheads back in the cave, hopefully ending the bad luck. The rest of part 2 is sort of a joke. Basically, it is mostly just the Vogan civil war between the Guardians and the militia, and Harry and Sarah being arrested by the militia to escape and to be recaptured, this time by the Guardians. The only cool thing about this episode is the knowledge of the Cyber Wars. So, the Cyber Nomads and the Vogans fought in the Cyber Wars, as the Cybermen want to destroy Voga, as it is mostly made of gold, which is a new Cybermen weakness. And this gold weakness is only really necessary in like 3 other stories in the history of the show. And then it is just forgotten again. But it ended when the Cybermen were so-called defeated, and Voga slowly was forgotten, as the Vogans hid underground. Speaking of the Cybermen, let's see their first proper scene, shall we?
Computer reports heavy phobic energy discharge between the beacon and Voga.
That means the humans have recently used their transmat beam.
Yes, leader.
Time to docking.
16 minutes.
Good. Order the boarding party to the forward hatch.
Now, like I mentioned before, the Cybermen are made more emotional and less robotic, which sort of defeats the purpose of emotionless cyborgs. And well, they do nothing in this story. They show up for a cool cliffhanger in episode 2, and then they just procrastinate. and they poorly threaten the main cast, who are also boring as well. This can lead them to be quite forgettable, and making their presence quite useless. So before I talk about part 3, I just want to say that this is actually the 400th Doctor Who episode broadcast. And despite what I say about the serial, this is a highly viewed one, and this episode, being the 400th, is probably the coolest thing about it. At the beginning of the episode, Kelman is talking to the Cyber Leader, where the Cyber Leader says this to him.
How far from the shaft entrance is the transmat receptor area?
Just a matter of yards. I set the receptors as close as possible.
Excellent, Kelman.
Now, it may seem a bit weird why I chose this clip, but I believe this is the very first time excellent is uttered by a Cyberman, starting their catchphrase in the classic show. Now, the phrase is usually associated with the Earthshock Cyber Leader, but this one does say it a few times, and this catchphrase has always been my favourite for the Cybermen. Personally, much better than the modern show's Delete. Shortly after this scene, Kelman transmats to Voga, where he breaks the news to Vorus. So Vorus's plan is very convoluted and quite strange. So he has mostly constructed this rocket, which is made secretly, and he wants to use it to destroy the Cybermen. So he hires Kelman to contact the Cybermen and pretend to be loyal to them by having them kill everyone on Nerva Beacon besides 4 members, so that they can board the ship. And then the rocket can be used to destroy the beacon. I don't know if it is that obvious, but why can't the rocket just be shot at the Cybermen ship? Like, there is no point in killing the crew with the so-called plague if no matter what they're just going to be blown up anyway. It is a beyond stupid plan and weakens the characters of the story. So on the beacon, the Dr. Stevenson and Lester are all strapped up with bombs, where they are forced to walk to the centre of Voga to plant the bombs and leave in 15 minutes. These cyber bombs are extremely powerful, and 2 are used to destroy the planet, but 3 for good luck. The catch is that they can't take off their straps until they're in the area, or the bombs will automatically explode. And they're also being tracked, so if they walk off course, they will be killed. This leads to this amazing line by the Doctor.
Careful, careful. I might explode.
So while this happens, Sarah is allowed to go back to the beacon to possibly warn the Doctor of the rocket, but she is too late. And when she arrives past the battle scene of the Cybermen and the Vogans, she finds it deserted besides the Cyber Leader and company. Harry and Kelman eventually learn that the Dr. Stevenson and Lester are carrying the bombs, so they chase after them. This leads to Harry accidentally causing a boulder to knock over a bunch of rocks, which kills Kelman and knocks the Doctor over. The cliffhanger is that he tries to unbuckle the bomb, as he doesn't know the consequences. So part 4 begins with Lester stopping Harry, where my favourite scene of the entire story happens, where the Doctor regains consciousness and says this to Harry.
Harry, were you trying to undo this?
Well, naturally.
Did you make the rocks fall, Harry?
Well, I suppose I must have done, yes.
Harry Sullivan is an imbecile!
So the bomb squad agree that they can take out the Cybermen with the detonator, so that they can free themselves. So the Doctor and Harry jump on a couple of them and quickly run away, as Lester sacrifices himself by self-detonating his bomb. Now, how has the Cyber Leader described it earlier was that 2 explosives can destroy the planet and 3 to make sure. So, I find it strange that there is 0 damage to the terrain when this bomb goes off. It might have been implied that this damage is only fatal to the core, but it is a strange continuity error. So after disarming the bombs, they return to find the rocket to be operational, so the Doctor wants to quickly take out the Cybermen before takeoff. He returns to the beacon where Sarah is captured, and he is soon as well. While this happens, Vorus gets trigger happy and starts the launch sequence, as he and Margaret get killed. After a quick massage from the Cybermen, the Doctor ties himself with Sarah as the Cybermen leave as the beacon is set to crash into Voga. But the Doctor is able to escape and commands Harry and Stevenson to control the rocket by having it destroy the Cybermen ship. As this happens, the Doctor takes control of Nerva Beacon and is barely able to maneuver it to not hit the planet. This scene is the main scene to be updated with CGI for the Blu-ray, and I will say it does look much better. So, the story ends with Harry transmitting back onto the beacon as the TARDIS finally returns, as it catches up to them. The Doctor comes out of it with a space telegram from the Brigadier, stating he's in trouble. This story abruptly ends with 0 goodbyes to Stevenson and Tyrone as the TARDIS dematerializes, leading to Season 13's The Terror of the Zygons. Like I stated before, Terror of the Zygons was planned to be the conclusion of this season, but it isn't. However, it is implied the TARDIS team went straight from this adventure into the next. This can cause issues with spin-offs, as Harry leaves the Doctor and Sarah in that story, meaning that the only place that this TARDIS team can have any audio or novelizations is in between these stories, killing the apparent urgency. It also means that Harry and Sarah have 6 consistent adventures back to back to back without any breaks. So I am happy that it has been retconned that they have a break in between seasons. Speaking of which, this is the final story of Season 12, and I just want to say that with flaws, this season is truly iconic and super fun to watch. Even on this rewatch, I was able to get a new appreciation to the Ark space, and I really enjoy this short-lived TARDIS team. And I get why this is the first classic season on Blu-ray. Speaking of which, I am planning to continue my reviews in collection box set order, continuing with Season 19. But going into Revenge of the Cybermen, this story just disappoints me. Firstly, this is the first Doctor Who serial ever to be released on home media, with an abridged 90-minute VHS in 1983, before a full episode release in 1986. And it confuses me why they picked this story out of every single story. This is also when Doctor Who stories were stopped being junked, and there's 0 missing stuff Season 12 onwards, as John Pertwee had many of his original colour episodes missing, and now the black and white versions have to be colorized. Anyway, if you want to watch a Cybermen story, or a 4th Doctor one, do me a favour and don't watch this. The Cybermen are easily the worst part, as they add nothing and are only here for the namesake and to pull in viewers. The Vogons are interesting, but their strange prosthetics make them strange, and their motivation and plan are weak. The side characters don't do much past episode 1, and they aren't really memorable at all. And the main cast are no better, as they feel quite bland, as they have a pretty poor script, with the occasional good line. So, that is why I'm giving Revenge of the Cybermen a 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching.